Hello, this is Patricia from patriciafenty.com, and today I have a tutorial on how to make this granny square scarf using 3 different sizes of granny squares. Now, while I'm going to show you how to make the scarf, these panels, these blocks, can be used for any number of projects, including blankets, pocket shawl, or any creative idea that you can come up with. So do follow along and I will show you how you can do these granny square designs. Now the yarn that I'm using is the Loops and Threads Impeccable line, and this is specific to Michaels, and I live in Canada, so I got these in Canada, and I couldn't seem to get onto a US website, so I'm assuming you can get this in Michaels US. If not, you could just pick any number 4 medium weight yarn. The only thing I would recommend is you would stay within 1 line of yarn because you want to keep the yarns the same weight, and number 4 medium weight yarns can vary a bit in size. So this is an acrylic yarn. There's 285 yards or 260 meters, 4.5 ounces or 127 grams. So 1 ball of each is to do this project and a small blanket. So this is golden beige, soft rose, rich orchid, claret, and burgundy. And so if you're going into another line of yarn, you can use a similar color palette. You could use 2 tones of blue or green or purple. All you want is a neutral, and then the lightest version, a medium tone, a darker tone, and the darkest tone. And if you want, you could use different colors and mix it up and be really playful. We're going to use a 5.5 millimeter crochet hook and a 5 millimeter or 6 millimeter crochet hook, and some scissors and a darning needle. And I forgot to mention that this is enough yarn to do the scarf and a small baby blanket. And if you wanted to do a bigger blanket, you'd need at least 2 balls of each color, depending on how big your blanket would be. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create panels using 3 different sizes of granny squares. These here are 9 inches, are 23 centimeters square. These here are 4.5 inches or 11.5 centimeters with 3 rounds. And these are 3 inches or 7.5 centimeters with 2 rounds. Now this panel and this panel are exactly the same. It's just the color combination that has changed. And I will have a written blog post and pattern for this, and you can see that in the description box below this video. And I'll have a photograph of each panel so you can see the color combination that I'm using. You could also just stop the video here and make a note of what those color combinations are. I'm not going to go through that in detail. Now, if you know how to crochet granny squares, then all you need to know is the trick to making this work, and that is the size of the crochet hook. So for me and this yarn and my tension, the 5 millimeter H8 crochet hook in 7 rounds gives me 9 inches. The same hook for 2 rounds gives me 3 inches. So 9 inches and 3 inches divide into each other. But what happens if I use this crochet hook for the 3 rounds is that these squares are too small and they don't fit. So the way to fix that is to go up in crochet hook size in order to get these squares bigger. Now, when I was working with this, I'd originally just gone up half a size to a 5.5 millimeter crochet hook, and I found that wasn't quite big enough. It was sort of pulling in on the sides here. So then For this panel here, I went to the 6mm crochet hook, the J10, a whole size up, and that made a big difference. And that made these squares fit nicely with the others. So my recommendation is to use whatever size crochet hook you like for the big square and the small squares, and then go up one whole size for the medium size squares. And that way they will all fit together nicely, and you can just sew and crochet your squares together, making the panels in this design. And you can mix up the colors in any way you like, and you have these really fun panels that you can then arrange in different ways to make all kinds of projects. So I have a drawing here. So we have block A and block B, which you flip upside down, and then you'd repeat block A over here again. And then for the bottom section, you flip everything around. So then you take the panel B, and that would go down below panel A. And I have this chart on the blog post, so make sure you check that out to see this up a little more closely. So you'd flip panel A flipped around, and panel B would be up there. And so what you can do with these panels is you can arrange them in all different types of ways. So you have this ABA, BAB. You could then repeat your B over here and repeat your A over here, and then repeat it again this way. So you could make a small blanket. You could make an afghan for the couch. You could make a blanket big enough for a twin, double, or queen size bed. If you just did 2 rows like this and repeated this one more time, that would be a nice size for a pocket shawl. And then you could make a couple of granny square pockets on each end. And then what I'm doing is I'm going to join these together to make a scarf, and I'll be doing 4 panels for that. So there's all sorts of things you can do. Now I do have a couple of little tricks to my granny squares, and I've been working to perfect my granny square technique. So I have a couple of great tips. So if you want to stick around and see how I make my granny squares, you're welcome to do that. Otherwise, you can just use this knowledge to create your own blocks, your own color combination, and do whatever you like. But next I will show you how to crochet the granny squares the way I do it, and then I'll show you later how to join it all together. Now I'll be demonstrating with the 5mm crochet hook, so make sure you use the right size hook for the appropriate size square. So I'm just using the cream color and creating a slip knot. If you're new to crochet, I do have my beginner crochet series that shows you all the basic stitches for crochet. Put that on your hook, tail to the right, set up your tension, and we'll begin with a chain 5. So yarn over, pull that through the loop, that's a chain 1, yarn over, pull the hook through the loop, yarn over, pull that through the loop, yarn over, pull that through the loop, and 5. So chain 5, and to create a ring, you put your hook into the top loop of the very first chain, yarn over, pull the yarn through that loop and the loop on your hook, and that's a slip stitch, and creating your ring. So you'll begin with a chain 2, and this is what's a little bit different about my granny square pattern. And you can keep the tail to the left and crochet that in if you like. So do a double crochet into the ring. So yarn over, put the hook into the ring, grab the yarn from behind. You'll have 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. Now chain 2, that'll be for your corner, and now we'll do a set of 3 double crochets. So yarn over, go into your ring, pull the yarn through, you'll have 3 loops on your hook, pull yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and we'll repeat that 2 more times for a total of 3 double crochets in one cluster. And that's your classic granny square cluster, a set of 3 double crochets. There we go. You can kind of push your work over to the right, chain 2, that will be for the next corner, and do another set of 3 double crochets into the ring. It's 2, and just sort of push that over, and 3. And then chain 2, that's the third corner, and then you'll do another set of 3 double crochets into the ring. And again, I do have the beginner crochet series. There's a link for that at the bottom of the description box below this video. And that'll teach you everything you need to know. And then chain 2, and that's your fourth corner. And so we started with a chain 2 rather than a chain 3. And this is 2 of the 3 stitches of this cluster. So we're going to do 1 more double crochet to make the 3rd stitch of that cluster. And we're going to join this round. There's your chain 1, your chain 2, but you're going to go into the 3rd stitch, which is the top of that double crochet, and you're going to go under both loops. You'll yarn over, pull through those 2 stitches and the one on your hook, and cut your tail and pull that through and fasten off. And that creates a very nice even granny square center. So next we'll do round 2. So joining on the new color, I'm using the darker pink, the medium pink. Create a slip knot, put that on your hook, keeping your tail to the right. And I like to go to the opposite side where I fastened off, and you'll join into the chain 2 space, put your hook into the space, and we'll join on with a slip stitch. So grab the yarn from behind, flip your tail over. You'll have 2 loops on your hook, and pull that yarn through the loop, and that's a slip stitch. Now you'll chain 2, and that counts as sort of the middle double crochet of that cluster. So then you'll do a double crochet, chain 2, push that over, and then you'll do a set of 3 double crochets into that same chain 2 space to create your cluster and your corner. And 3. There we go. And then chain 1, and then go over to your next corner and do a set of 3 double crochets. And every corner will be done in the same way. And that's 3. Push that over, chain 2, and another set of 3 double crochets into that same chain 2 space. And 3. And then chain 1. And go ahead and work your corner into the next chain 2 space, chain 1, another corner into the next chain 2 space, chain 1, and I will meet you back there. Welcome back. So here we're coming back around to where we started off, and again you're coming to a cluster that only has 2 of the 3 stitches done. So we'll finish this in the same way as the first round, where you'll do a double crochet into that chain 2 space, and then you'll join this round. There's your chain 1, your chain 2, and then there's your 3rd stitch, and in this 3rd stitch you'll go under both loops, yarn over, bring the yarn through those 2 loops, the loop on your hook, and you can fasten off. And if you want, you can do a chain 1 to fasten off. And then again, you have a very nice finish to that beginning cluster. and you're always finishing and beginning in the corners, which is really good when you go to darn in your tail ends. Then you're darning into 2 clusters rather than just 1 cluster. So that's one of my little tricks. So go ahead and darn in your tail ends however you like. And now I'll show you how to do the 3rd round. All right, so for the 3rd round, I'm using the light pink. Create a slip knot, put that on your hook, tail to the right, and I like to go to the opposite side from where I fastened off from. So going into the chain 2 space, you'll join with a slip stitch. So grab the yarn from behind, flip your tail over, and go through the loop on your hook, and that's a slip stitch. So we'll begin in the same way with a chain 2, and you can push that over to the side and do your double crochet, and then a chain 2, push that over again, and then do a set of 3 double crochets into that chain 2 space. And that's 3, and then chain 1, and now you'll be working into the chain 1 space from the previous round. So for every sequential round after this, you'll always work a cluster of 3 double crochets and a chain 1 into the chain 1 space. And of course, each round will get bigger, and you'll be working more sets of 3 double crochets along the straight edge with a chain 1 in between. And then as you come to the corner, you'll work your corner in the same way with a set of 3 double crochets, and that's 3, and then a chain 2 and 3 double crochets into that same chain 2 space. Now this isn't actually a color combination that I have in the pattern. I'm just using it so you can see. So then you want to chain 1 and go over to your next chain 1 space and work a set of 3 double crochets. I'm just running out of yarn here, so that's 2 and 3 and a chain 1, and you'll just repeat that pattern all the way around. All right, so here I am at the end, and I finished my last set of 3 double crochets, chain 1. So coming back around to this beginning cluster here that only has 2 stitches, we'll finish that with a double crochet into that chain 2 space. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to finish off your final round of granny squares. So whether you're doing 2 rounds or 3 rounds or 7 rounds, your final round you would finish in this way. So rather than joining with a slip stitch into that double crochet, you're going to cut the tail, pull the yarn off your hook, put your darning needle onto the thread here, and this time you'll come in from the back of that 3rd stitch. So not your chain 1 or your chain 2, but the back of that 3rd stitch. You'll come in under the 2 stitches there with the needle and thread, pull the yarn through, pull that snug, and then that stitch that the yarn comes out of, there's a V stitch there. You'll go into the middle of the V stitch, and you're also going to pick up this little bump at the back, and you'll pick up both those stitches, and you'll bring the yarn in through there and snug that up, and look how nice and smooth that finish is. And what this does is it creates a nice seam that doesn't have a knot in it. And when you're joining your squares together, you're not sewing or crocheting into a knot. It's a nice even finish for your final round. And so then you'd go ahead and darn in all your tail ends. That's one of the things with granny squares, that there's so many ends to darn in. I actually like it. I found it quite relaxing. But isn't that a nice, neat square? So to do the one with 7 rounds, you just carry on adding your colors as you go until you have your 7 rounds, and just increasing your clusters of 3 double crochets along the long side. And then you'll have your 7 rounds. So there you go. That's how you do the granny squares, and you have that nice even finish on the outside. And next I will show you how to lay these all out. Great. So I do apologize for the lighting. It's so dark out today and I just can't get the light right. But anyways, let's carry on. So once you have your granny squares for each panel all made and all your tails darned in, we're going to start to sew the panels together. So you'll start by sewing this seam together here for the 4-inch squares, and then you'd sew this here and here, and then you'd sew a seam down there. And that will leave you with 3 different panels to then join together. Now what happens is when you're joining squares of the same size together, your stitch count will work out. But when you're joining different size squares together, they won't. So what you'll have is the big panel will have 31 stitches. Once these two are sewn together, there'll be 28 stitches. So you need to drop some. When you're stitching it together, you can drop, say, a chain 1 space stitch. Use the whip stitch that you join these together with as an extra stitch, and then skip over or drop a chain stitch in one of these spaces here, and that will bring your stitch count to the same amount. And here what'll happen is you'll have 30 stitches and 28 stitches. So here you would just skip the chain 1 space here, you'd skip over that, and you'd skip it over there, and then the panels will sew together nicely. Now the other thing I want to talk about is choosing your color of yarn to stitch together with. So here I would choose the red because it's the more dominant color. Here you could join with either the wine or the pink. That's totally up to you. Here I would choose the wine because there's 2 squares that have the wine. And then here you could just choose any color that you like, and that will work out good. Now here is an example where I did choose the dominant color of the pink, so that worked well there, but in here with these dark colors it didn't work very well. So I redid it on the second panel, and I used the red for that little section there, and I think that looks so much better there. So I think that worked out quite well. It just meant having to darn in some extra tail ends. So now I'll show you how to do the actual whip stitch. Now, in order to measure your yarn, how much you'll need for these together, whatever size a square or seam that you're sewing together, you'll measure double the length of the seam plus another 4 inches or so for the tail ends. And that will give you a right amount of yarn. So then you put that on your darning needle, and I am choosing the pink for the color to join my yarn into. So whatever is the color of your darning thread, I like to have that square of the pieces that I'm joining together. So you can start by darning in the one direction into the back up towards the chain 2 space, and you leave a little bit in that you can darn in back the other way. So you have your chain 2 spaces in each square, and we're going to come in to the top loop of the first chain of the chain 2 space, just the one loop from behind, and then you'll come around to the next square and you're going into the top loop from the top of the first chain of the chain 2 space. So you're picking up those outside loops. And then on the top square, you'll come in from the back, going underneath the second chain of the chain 2 space, just picking up the 1 stitch, and then you'll come back down into the second chain of the chain 2 space of your bottom square, and now you're starting to stitch into the regular stitches of the top square. And so you'll just bring the needle around to the front, coming in from the front, and then picking up the top loop from the back of the top square. And you're just working into the top loops of each square, just whip stitching them together like that. And as you're going along, I'm coming out of a double crochet and I'm going up into a chain 1 space stitch. And that is correct. That's how the stitch count should work out. And that makes sure that your squares are staying aligned. And then what you can do is you can tighten up your stitches if they're a little bit loose. You can just use your needle to snug those up until you get your stitch tension figured out. And then you'll just whip stitch all the way along, picking up just the top loop only. Now you could go into both loops if you like, but I find this creates a really nice frame around each square. So as you work along, you'll be coming into your chain spaces at the end here. So here I'm coming into the chain spaces, and so here I'm into the last chain of the chain 2 space of the top square, and the very last stitch is coming down into the second chain of the chain 2 space of the bottom square, with your tail going into the back. And then of course you can darn in your tail ends. And so what that does is it makes sure that your squares are lining up perfectly. So you're always finish that last stitch going down into the second chain of the chain 2 space of the bottom square. And that's just a good way to keep track of your stitches and keep it nice and even. So there you go, stitch all your squares and your panels together, and I'll come back and show you how I'm making out. Welcome back. So here I've sewn my 4 panels together. So that's panel B, and panel A, and panel B, and panel A. And so if you want to do a border, you can choose any color you like for that, and I'm going to use the red. Now, you don't have to do a border. This looks really nice just the way that it is, but I am going to do a border of single crochet, and I'll show you how to start that. And then I'll also just tell you how you can do a border with half double crochets or double crochet border or the granny square stitch border. So choosing the color that you want to do your border in, you want to create a slip knot. And if you're doing a bigger project, you could do 1 row of each color or 1 row of 3 of the colors. It's totally up to you, but I'm using the red. So you start with a slip knot on your hook and going into any stitch that you like. Again, there's 2 ways you can do this. You can either go in under both loops and crochet all the way around going under both loops, or you can crochet just into the top loop. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to pick up the top loop because I like the way that creates a frame around the project. So you'll join on with a single crochet, so flip your tail over and yarn over and pull that through 2 loops. And then you'll do a single crochet into the top loop of or both loops of each stitch all the way around. And again, I teach these stitches in the beginner crochet series. And when you get to the intersection here, you'll just pick up the 1 stitch from the granny square. You're not picking up the whip stitch. And then going over to the next square, you'll pick up that first stitch of the next square and do a single crochet there. and then you'll single crochet into the top loop or both loops of each stitch all the way around, whichever you like. And then when you come to the chain one space, I like to keep going into the top loop, picking that up. If you are doing the 2 loops, you could go right into the chain one space. Again, that's totally up to you. And as you come to the corner, you need to do some increase stitches to get around this corner. It might be a little bit hard to tell which is the chain 2, but I'm going to take this one here and do 2 single crochets into that one stitch, and then going over to the next stitch, do 2 single crochets again into that second stitch. So you'll get 4 single crochets to go around the corner, and then carry on doing a single crochet into the top loop of each stitch all the way around. And what that does is it creates a really nice little frame around your project. And when you come to this side here, then you would just join on with that invisible stitch using the needle and thread, going into that second stitch there. Now, if you want to do a half double crochet or a double crochet border, it's the same technique as the single crochet, except you're joining on with a slip stitch and a chain 2. And that's the same whether it's a half double crochet or a double crochet. And so then you'll do a half double crochet or a double crochet in the top loop of each stitch all the way around, or both loops if you want to do it that way. When you get to the corner with the half double crochet, you will do 2 half double crochets in the chain 1 and 2 half double crochets in the chain 2 and carry on. But with the double crochet, the stitch is a little bit taller and you need 1 more stitch to get around the corner. So you can do 2 and then do a double crochet into the chain 1 space and 2 into the second chain. And that will get you around the corner nicely. So then if you want to do the granny square clusters all the way around, essentially you're just crocheting around using the exact same pattern that you've done for the granny squares, joining on in the corner as before and finishing in the way that I showed you before. But what you can play around with is you may want to omit the chain 1 on the final round and just do 3 double crochet in the chain 1 space, 3 double crochet in the chain 1 space. It depends on your yarn and your tension, but by eliminating the chain 1 for the final round, it will bring it in a little bit more snug. It just depends on your tension. For me, I eliminate the chain 1 for the final round of the border. So there you go. There's the different options to finish your project. I'm going to go ahead and finish with my row of single crochet, and I'll come back for the final reveal. Welcome back. So the final measurement for the scarf is 81 inches by 9.5 inches, and I just finished with that row of single crochet with the red, and I think it worked really well. It went well with all the colors and creates a really nice frame. And it's simple. When you're working with a lot of different colors, the simplicity of just a row of single crochet works really well. So there you go, and here's a view of me wearing it, and it's just such a pretty scarf. I hope you have fun with these pretty panels and make some sort of a fun project with that. So I hope you enjoy this tutorial. Please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more creative and inspiring videos. We'll see you next time.